Change, the solution for humanity.
Done. It's over. The Muslims have all agreed to appoint Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him, as the successor of the Prophet ﷺ, the Khalifa of the Prophet ﷺ, and the ruler of the Muslim state. Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him, immediately the following day gave his inaugural speech. It was not full of promises. It was not rhetoric. It was not a long speech that people would forget the beginning by the time they reach the end. It was concise. You can count the number of words, and it sets clearly his direction, may Allah be pleased with him, in ruling the Muslim state. He said, when he gathered the people in the masjid, "O people, I have been appointed upon you while I'm not the best one among you." And this is an understatement. Of course, he is the best among them all. But being humble, being who he is, he started his speech in such a fashion: "I was appointed upon you, and I am not the best one among you. If I have performed correctly, then support me. If I do well, support me and stand next to me. But if I have done wrong, if I was unfair, then straighten me up. You have to fix any wrongdoings, any shortcomings that I may have." He went on to say, "The weak among you is strong in my eyes until I take his rights from those who oppress him and from those who are aggressors. And the strong among you is weak in my eyes until I take the rights he deprived the weak from. And no people ever abandon jihad except Allah Azza wa Jal would immediately humiliate them on earth. And you should obey me as long as I obey Allah and I obey His Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And if ever it so happens, if ever I disobeyed Allah or disobeyed His Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, then you do not and you must not obey me at all. Stand up for your prayer. May Allah have mercy upon you." That was it. This was all of his speech. Very concise, very powerful, and to the point. It illustrates to us that Abu Bakr was not a tyrant. Abu Bakr was not looking to rule. He was not looking forward for it. It was said that Abu Bakr did not want this life, and life did not want him neither. So, though before Islam he was a millionaire, he was a rich businessman, but after Islam, he gave all of his money for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal and to support Islam. When he became a ruler, nothing changed. He was still the person he was, living in a small room, wearing the same clothes, did not have a wardrobe full of suits and clothes. He did not have a strong and fancy ride. He had nothing. All what he had was for the Muslims. So the position never ever changed Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him. On the contrary, it was Abu Bakr who changed the position. He set the guidelines. If I obey Allah, you obey me. Whenever I disobey Allah, you should not by any means follow me or obey me, because the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, there is no obedience to a creature whenever he disobeys Allah the Almighty. And this is the guideline that all Muslims should follow. Our obedience is to Allah and to the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. This is the full and complete obedience. If someone, whoever that one is, instructs us or orders us to disobey Allah or to disobey the Prophet ﷺ, we should not listen or adhere to that, because this is a sin by itself. Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him, had a number of achievements in his life while he reigned and ruled the Muslims. Though it was not very long, it was only 2 years and a couple of months. That was it. But during these 24 or 26 months plus, he did wonders. Imagine, he, during these wars or during these months, waged a fierce war against those who rejected Islam among the Muslims. And it was known as Harbul Murtaddin, the apostates' war. And this was caused by a number of tribes, but actually everybody, all the tribes, have rejected Islam when the Prophet died, alayhi salatu wasalam, thinking that the Muslim were only revolving around the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and so was Islam. So if the Prophet is gone, alayhi salatu wasalam, then Islam is gone as well. So among the achievements of Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him, that he waged what is known as the war against the apostates. And after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, everyone rejected Islam. Those who embraced it, who reverted to it, who accepted it at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the minute he died, they rejected it, thinking that Islam revolves only around the Prophet ﷺ. And with him dead, with him out of the picture, there was no Islam to be followed. All of them rejected Islam with the exception of Mecca and Medina. These were the only two cities where Jum'ah, where Friday prayers were prayed. And some say, and also Al-Ahsa or Bahrain, they still remained Muslims, and some say few in Thaqif or in Taif. So the Muslims had to take a decisive decision, and Abu Bakr was the man to do this. He decided to wage war against these apostates. Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, rejected this at the very beginning, and he said, how would you do something the Prophet did not do, alayhi salam? How would you fight people who believe that there is no God worthy of being worshipped but Allah? And Abu Bakr was furious, and he said in harsh words, which is not his habit, he replied to Umar by saying, "O Umar, are you brave at the time of Jahiliyyah, at the time of ignorance before Islam, and a coward in the time of Islam? How is it that Allah accomplished and completed his religion at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and now in my time it is to be deducted and reduced by Allah? If they prevent me from giving me to the Muslims' treasury, the Bayt al-Islam or Bayt al-Mal, if they prevent delivering these things, even if it's a rope that leads a camel, if they would not hand it to me, by Allah I will fight them." Because they used to do this to the Prophet ﷺ, and now they've stopped doing it to me. And the minute he said that, Umar realized and knew that it was from Allah, and Allah was guiding Abu Bakr to the right thing. We have a short break. Stay tuned, and inshallah, we will be right back.
As his was a mission of the greatest task.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome back. So Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him, set his armies to fight, and he appointed Khalid ibn al-Walid, may Allah be pleased with him, to have these battles that history reports that had lots of stories about courage, about bravery, and about giving people's lives freely to the cause of Allah, the Almighty. And as he did this, there were lots of casualties among the Muslims while they were fighting these apostates. And among these casualties were a number of what was known as Al-Qurra, the reciters, those who memorized the Quran. Some narration says that 70 of them died. They were martyred at these battles. And Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, went to Abu Bakr and said, Abu Bakr, I believe that it is our duty and job to preserve the Quran. This was a year after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. And we have to compile the Quran to bring it in one book. And I have to give a short introduction to this so that it would not confuse people. Quran is preserved by Allah the Almighty. It is the word of Allah. And it was revealed to our Prophet ﷺ. And the Quran was preserved in two methods. And it's Allah who preserved it. It was preserved through writing, and it was preserved through memorizing it. So whenever a verse or a number of verses were revealed to the Prophet ﷺ, he would call his scribes, and they would write it down on bones, on leaves of palms trees or else, on pieces of stones, flat white stones. And at the same time, most of the companions would memorize it by heart. So there was no need for compiling it. Besides, the Quran was not revealed in sequence. It was revealed portions and portions, and the Prophet would say, put this portion in Surah Al-Anfal, put this portion between this surah and that surah. And there was what is known as abrogation. There was known as naskh. So a verse would be revealed and then Allah Azza wa Jal abrogates it. And He either takes it completely or leaves it and abrogates the ruling, or does the both, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is why it was not compiled at the time of the Prophet ﷺ into one mushaf. But after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, and after the death of the numbers of those who memorized it by heart, Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, was afraid. He was afraid that people who memorized the Quran would go less in number. And it is not sufficient to have it only printed or written down, because it is both ways. It has to go both ways, through reading, reciting, and through writing. So he advised Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him, to compile the Quran. And Abu Bakr at first, he did not want to do this. He thought that, how would I do something the Prophet ﷺ did not do himself? But then, after a short period, he was convinced with Umar's advice, and he instructed Zayd ibn Thabit, may Allah be pleased with him, to compile the Quran. And Zayd, as we know, was the major and the main scribe of the Prophet ﷺ. He was a young learned man, and he learned the Hebrew language in 11 days, as the story tells us. So they instructed him to compile the Quran. He rejected this at first, saying that, how would I do something the Prophet did not do, alayhi salam? And it was not too long before he was convinced with their opinion, and he managed to get all the copies of the bones, stones, and leaves of trees that had the Quran verses written on, with 2 witnesses with each verse. And he compiled the Quran in one book that was kept with Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him. So this is one of the greatest achievements of Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him, which helped to preserve the Quran with the guidance of Allah the Almighty. And among his achievements was setting off the army of Usama ibn Zayd. And of course you know who Usama ibn Zayd is. And in case you don't know, Usama ibn Zayd is the son of Zayd ibn Haritha. And Zayd ibn Haritha, may Allah be pleased with him, was the adopted son of the Prophet ﷺ before adoption was void. At the beginning of Islam, it was allowed for a person to adopt someone and gives him his name. So Zayd was known as Zayd ibn Muhammad. And then Allah revealed, the Almighty, in Surah Al-Ahzab, that the cancellation of such a verdict, and stated that adoption is not permissible in Islam. What's permissible is that you take care of an orphan, that you take care of someone who has no one to take care of him, but he has to keep his name, and he does not have any right in inheriting you as a legitimate child of yours, a legitimate child of your offspring. This is not the case with whoever you take in your custody. So Zayd ibn Haritha was a beloved person to the Prophet ﷺ because he considered him and treated him as a son. Now his son, Usama ibn Zayd, was also a person of great concern to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet loved him so much. His father, Zayd ibn Haritha, was a white man. Usama was as black as night. He was pitch black, and he had a flat nose. So in short, the companions say that he was so ugly that had he been a girl, he would not have been married at all. And with these features in him, the Prophet ﷺ loved him greatly. Now we have to remember that in the 8th year, if I'm not mistaken, the Prophet ﷺ sent a battalion, an army, to fight the Romans. And they were 3,000 in number, and he appointed Zayd ibn Haritha as their leader. And then Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, and then if anything happened to them both, Abdullah ibn Rawaha. And they were all martyred. So now it was time to set, and this was few days before the death of the Prophet ﷺ. He gathered an army and he instructed Usama ibn Zayd, the son of Zayd ibn Haritha, who was martyred fighting the Romans. He instructed him to lead this army to the north and fight the Romans again, to take revenge for his father. And the people did not like this, simply because Usama was 17 years old. And in his army were Umar, Uthman, Ali, and the great warriors of Islam. So how do you appoint Usama ibn Zayd, who is a kid, he's a teenager, to lead these great companions of Islam? And the Prophet ﷺ did not pay any attention to their remarks. He said that you have spoken against me giving the leadership to his father before, and now you're giving me again the same remarks about him. By Allah, he is worthy of it. And the Prophet ﷺ does not do anything from his whim. What he does, believing in what Allah Azza wa Jal instructs him to do. So soon afterwards, the Prophet died ﷺ. And the army was at the outskirts of Medina waiting for the instruction of the Prophet ﷺ when they heard that he died. Abu Bakr, the minute he assumed power, he instructed the army to go out to fulfill the mission of the Prophet ﷺ. So the companions said, Abu Bakr, the apostates now are fighting us. Everyone is collapsing on us, and we are weak and vulnerable. Keep this army at the moment so that they can defend Medina. Otherwise, if they attack Medina, we're annihilated. Abu Bakr said, no, I would never ever make an army that the Prophet instructed us ﷺ, to set him out. I would never ever keep them. I would never ever dissolve a flag that the Prophet ﷺ tied himself. And he instructed and ordered them to go. But he requested Usama humbly to keep Umar next to him as his advisor and as his supporter. And Usama agreed to that. He requested, he did not instruct, because the Prophet instructed Umar to be in the army. So Abu Bakr, though he was ranked number 1, yet he requested humbly Usama to allow him, and Usama gave him this permission and he kept it. Abu Bakr walked while Usama was on his horse outside the skirts of Medina, leading his horse to the army. And Usama said, by Allah, either you mount with me or I dismount and come down. And Abu Bakr said, may Allah be pleased with him, neither both. I will walk and you will ride. Imagine this man of 60 years old and this kid of 17 years old. He is pulling his horse, leading his horse. He said, Usama, don't you even want my shoes to be dusted in the cause of Allah? Let me walk. Let me bear this suffering, because it's not a suffering. It's something that Allah will reward me for. And he made the army go and fight. And this had a great propaganda among the Arabs, because they realized that if in such times of calamities they are setting the army out, this means that they're preserving much more strength in Medina, that they're not even afraid of anyone. So this made all the tribes stay away and refrain from attacking Medina, and it gave this reputation to Medina of being strong and powerful. I'm afraid that this is all the time we have for today's program. Until we meet next time, fi amanillah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.